What's up, gang? Kawaii50 here with another FGO servant breakdown. Here to cover our brand new Moon Cancer class servant that will be arriving on NA very soon. And on top of that, this servant will be permanently added to the Gacha rotation. She is not limited, she is here to stay. And that servant is Ganesha. We're going to be going over all aspects of Ganesha's kit, some of the best teams she can fit on, what craft essences you might want to put on her, as well as some of the best command codes. So, whether you're running her as Great Statue God or in her true form, if this servant interests you, consider liking and subscribing for more content. Ganesha has a quick arts buster deck with a arts type noble phantasm that hits all of your enemies. Now, she is the Moon Cancer class, so you need to consider she is going to be weak against rulers, but is going to be pretty much taking neutral damage from everything else except berserkers. But this works very well in Ganesha's favor. Looking at her stacks, her max HP of 17,844 is the highest amount of HP any servant has in the entire game. So with Ganesha taking neutral damage from most things, that HP is going to stretch even further than normal. The downside, of course, is her attack stat. We need some sort of trade-off. Her attack of 9,166 is the lowest attack of any 5-star servant in Fate Grand Order. So you can already see what kind of role she's starting to get pushed into. Her NP per hit is fine at a 0.35%. So you'll be able to use her Noble Phantasm with, fair regularity. I wouldn't expect Castoria level loops with this servant though. Her Star Absorption, of course, is fine at a 51. Considering the role we want Ganesha to fill, Star Absorption is not really a very important stat. Ganesha's first skill is Business Prosperity, rank A. This increases the Noble Phantasm gauge of all of her allies by 10 to 20%, and also increases their attack for 3 turns by that same 10 to 20%. It also applies an effect where all allies will gain 5 crit stars per turn for 3 turns. So that's going to be 15 crit stars per turn for your entire front line. I highly recommend maxing this skill first over all others. For starters, you want that low cooldown on this skill so you can pop the 5 crit stars per turn as much as possible. That is the main reason we want to level this up. The NP gauge and attack boosts, of course, are important as well. This is Ganesha's primary way to increase her allies' attack. You know you're not going to be using her for damage, so use Ganesha to buff up your allies whenever possible. Ganesha's second skill is Broken Tusk, rank B. This applies 1 turn of target focus to Ganesha, and also applies damage cut 1,000 to her for a single turn. This also has the added bonus of increasing Ganesha's attack by 20 to 30% for 3 turns. I recommend maxing this skill last, just really because of what ends up scaling when you start investing in it. The only thing that scales up when you invest in it is Ganesha's attack boost. And as we already mentioned, with her lowest attack stat of any 5-star in the game, that is not what we want to be boosting on Ganesha. The main reason you're going to be using this skill is for the target focus, either to sacrifice Ganesha to a Noble Phantasm, or to use Ganesha to absorb damage on a turn where you know the enemy has a high chance to crit. And you want to make sure that damage goes to the one taking neutral damage, and not your damage dealer. Ganesha's final skill is Vinayaka, rank EX. This gives an ally, so it can be on Ganesha or any other ally, 1 turn of invincibility and 1 turn of 20 to 30% increased NP gain. This is sacrificed, of course, with the demerit of applying Skill Seal to that character. I would recommend maxing this second to reduce the cooldown on the invincibility, as well as increasing the overall NP gain. Some players might think the skill seal is a poor trade-off, but it really isn't. If you're paying attention to the way you are using your skills, just use all of that servant's skills before you chuck this invincibility buff on them, and it'll be like the skill seal was never even there to begin with. Ganesha's Noble Phantasm is Ganesha Impact. This decreases the defense for all enemies by 30% for 3 turns before the damage is dealt. It then deals damage at a 450 to 750% multiplier. This also applies invincibility to Ganesha for 1 turn, so it is primed to use this during the same turn you use her second skill, the target focus one. This also recovers Ganesha's HP, 2,000 to 6,000 depending on the level of overcharge. Looking at Ganesha's Noble Phantasm, the big takeaway from this is that it reduces all of your enemies' defense by 30%. That is not only an incredible debuff, but defense reduction does stack with other instances of defense reduction. So you can get some crazy paper-thin enemies if you use this Noble Phantasm at the correct time. Now, it's iffy depending on where you'd want to place Ganesha's Noble Phantasm. I'd say ideally chuck it second, since you're probably running 1 damage dealer, Ganesha as a supporter, and another supporter. Use the other supporter's Noble Phantasm, follow it up with Ganesha's if she's low on health, and then use your damage dealer's Noble Phantasm at the end. You can swap these around if Ganesha isn't hurting for HP. And of course, a lot of players always wonder, is a higher NP level going to be worth it on this servant? I would say for Ganesha, you could just be Noble Phantasm 1 and everything will be fine. The damage multiplier is not a big deal because Ganesha's attack is so low. I would only have recommended getting increased NP levels if the defense reduction on your opponents was tied to NP. It's not, so anything beyond NP1 isn't really necessary. For craft essences, Ganesha is first and foremost a supporter, so we are focusing on pure supportive craft essences. For a freebie option, I would definitely recommend his Rightful Place, granting stars per turn as well as a starting NP gauge, so you can get Ganesha's defense reduction on your opponents as fast as possible. There is of course the absolutely ideal craft essence of a Fragment of 2030. Those stars per turn are just too good to be beat. Also, if you see yourself using Ganesha's Noble Phantasm routinely, you can also go ahead and give her Prisma Cosmos. This will give her some NP per turn and help her average to bad NP gain depending on how you look at it. I would say pretty much anything you could give Ganesha that has stars per turn is going to be the most ideal craft essence on her. For Ganesha's allies, you can really pair her with anybody considering her status as a support. But for the purposes of specific allies to recommend, I'm going to be focusing on arts type servants. Considering Ganesha's stacked arts deck, being able to pair her with another arts type servant is going to be the fastest way to get your damage dealer a swift and punishing Noble Phantasm. Let's of course start with a freebie option, who happens to be one of my favorite freebies in the entire game. Should be coming out on NA this year if I remember correctly. That is Kagetora Nagao, or you might know her better as Uesugi Kenshin. Kagetora is a fantastic single-target arts damage-dealing servant who is completely and utterly free. The main reason she pairs well with Ganesha? Well, to start with, Ganesha is able to provide her with stars every single turn, and considering her first skill increases her arts card effectiveness and her critical star gather rate, she is going to gobble up those stars right when she needs them. She also has a second skill that is her primary damage avoidance. It's an evade tied with an NP gain. Well, Ganesha is able to provide invincibility, which is better than evade, and she is also able to provide an NP gain boost to allies on top of that. So you could actually conceivably stack up these NP gains if you really want a turn where you need to supercharge Kagetora's NP gain. If not, and what most players will do, is split this up between turns, actually having NP gain from this skill on Kagetora and using Ganesha's invincibility in order to actually avoid attacks. Considering on top of that, Kagetora is going to be an arts type servant at NP5 because she's free, you are going to see massive returns on not only that NP gain, but the attack boost and NP charge that Ganesha is able to provide. Now, I know better than to include him with freebies at this point since he was a limited 3-star, but Okada Izo works very well with Ganesha as well. For much of the same reason Kagetora Nagao worked very well with Ganesha. He has an evade that is tied to a damage boost, so being able to have an invincibility as your backup will allow Okada to use his evade on turns that aren't necessarily ideal, and use that skill for the massive critical strength boost instead. And considering he is an arts crit servant, he'll not only be able to use his Noble Phantasm more often, but will be able to take the stars Ganesha makes and turn those into increased damage. And since we mentioned Okada Izo, we of course need to mention Saber Lancelot. Still, one of the undisputed kings of the arts crit meta, Saber Lancelot's kit is complemented nicely by Ganesha's. Ganesha can provide him stars, Ganesha can provide him an attack boost. Ganesha can provide him invincibility, which he lacks any form of evade or invincibility, so that's going to go a long way towards helping Lancelot's survivability. Also, on top of that, Arondite Overload has the ability where it increases the damage taken for a single enemy for 5 turns. Now, this flat damage increase will stack with the defense reduction that Ganesha provides to her enemies. So you're not only just getting that flat damage increase from Lancelot solely existing, but all of his attacks are going to be doing more damage by virtue of Ganesha's defense reduction. These next two are extra classes. We are of course going to start with our favorite Iliasfeel incarnation with her bear Shiro. Now, the main reason I am mentioning her is because of her Noble Phantasm. Her Noble Phantasm is the ability to decrease the defense of a single enemy by 20 to 40% for 3 turns based on overcharge. Looking at just a base charge combined with Ganesha's Noble Phantasm, that is going to be a 50% defense reduction on your opponents. This is going to ensure that your primary damage dealer is going to be dealing a lot of damage. Defense basically just won't apply at all. Of course, Snow Fairy EX provides an invincibility, but giving a second instance of invincibility on top of that always goes better when it comes to survivability. And finally, I do want to mention how Ganesha pairs well with a lot of people's favorite foreigner, Yang Guifei. If you've used Yang Guifei on JP, you know that she has quite a few instances of defense reduction in her kit on her opponents. Well, this defense reduction, of course, stacks with Ganesha's own brand of defense reduction. So already to start with, your paper-thin berserkers you're likely fighting with Yang Guifei are going to be taking extra damage. Yang does, of course, have an invincibility buff on her own that grants an NP region with critical stars, but gang, charging extra critical stars on top of that is going to help her out so much when it comes to crits. Having an additional instance of invincibility ensures you can maybe decide to pop this on a fight where you just need the critical stars or just need to have the NP gauge boosters start going. You can have that extra invincibility as backup, which is going to be incredibly helpful. And of course, her incredibly powerful Noble Phantasm deals extra damage to enemies that are inflicted with the burn status. This is entirely overcharge related, but if you're able to further reduce your enemy's defense reduction, you have an even higher chance of this potentially being a one-hit kill on your berserker of choice. For Ganesha's command codes, we can really go pure and simple. She takes neutral damage, and she has one of the largest HP pool in the entire game. So let's just straight up go all into HP recovery. Maiden of Orleans is a fantastic 5-star command code that recovers 1000 HP whenever you attack with the engraved card. Bride of White Rose is of course a popular choice, recovering the entire party's HP by 200 when attacking using that card. Code Bless is of course your freebie option, recovering 100 HP when attacking using the card. It ain't much, but a boost is a boost. And of course you can give Ganesha Good Wife Wise Fox. To up her healing received by 50% one time for 2 turns, you go ahead and use the card this command code is to attach to before you end up using Ganesha's Noble Phantasm, and that overcharge based HP recovery is going to provide you even more health back. Gang, some people out there may look at Ganesha and look at her low damage output and consider her useless. I just want to let you know that absolutely all of those people are wrong, and you don't need that kind of negativity in your life. You don't look for damage boosts on your Merlin. You don't look for damage boosts on your Skahawk Scotty for her to deal more damage. You don't look for your Helena Blavatsky or your Waver to be your primary damage dealer. Ganesha is a support and a tank through and through, and she has quite a few skills that are able to provide your party with some pretty significant boosts. Business Prosperity is a fantastic supportive skill, and it would be fantastic based on the crit star generation per turn alone, considering that's able to stack with other craft essences. She is able to eat more damage than almost anybody else, considering her high HP pool, her chance to take neutral damage from the vast majority of things, and her invincibility skills, her target focus. There is just so much going for Ganesha that she is an absolutely brilliant addition to the permanent character pool. If you end up pulling a Ganesha, you'll need to definitely level all of her skills to max, but you will find yourself a very serviceable support servant who fits on any team, fits even better on arts teams, and who will ensure that all of your servants will survive. She will take all of the hits to get your party through whatever quest you need her on. Remember, when Ganesha's banner does come out though, she is permanently added, so she will have a chance to show up in your Chaldea at any time from that point forward. But I want to know what you all think, so go ahead and let me know your thoughts about Ganesha down in the comment section below. Let me know if there are any other craft essences you might throw on her, anyone you see that she has worked particularly well with, and let me know if you're excited for Ganesha to be added to the game. I know, of course, Arjuna Altar is coming out, and pretty much everybody is laser focused on him more than anybody else. But I still think Ganesha is an incredibly valuable addition, and I would like to see people who feel that way as well letting us know down below too. If you want to talk more FGO, my Discord is always open. Big thank you to the patrons and the subscribers on Twitch for all of their support. You guys are really going to help me out when it comes to rolling for Arjuna Altar when he comes out, and I really appreciate that. And, of course, go ahead, check out Twitch, follow on it. We play a lot of FGO, we're playing a lot of Final Fantasy XIV, and it is just a fun time in the chat all around. I hope you're all having a phenomenal day out there, and I'll see you all in the next video.